is calling. Point number one, your ability to discover your calling is directly tied to your level of commitment. Point number one, your ability to discover your calling is directly tied to your level of commitment. When you go back to Romans 12, verse 1, it says, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that ye present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. When you are in position directly under God, you will not have to find your calling will find you. I'm going to say it again. When you are in position directly under God, you will not have to find or create your calling. Your calling will find you. How did I discover my life purpose? I was serving God faithfully in everything he allowed me to be able to be a part of in the ministry. Notice I said allowed me. And I counted it a privilege. And so I handle it as such. I did not think that I was too wonderful to work in the parking lot. I did not think that I was too wonderful to usher. I did these things. Don't think that I haven't. I've ushered. I wasn't too wonderful to do the work of a deacon and not have a title. And so he says, I urge you to present yourself a living sacrifice. And I thought this was interesting. How many people have always questioned this particular phrase that's not on the screen, but it will be in a second, 12 and 1 of Romans. When he said, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present yourself a living sacrifice. I always had a hard time with this because it's a contradiction. Because sacrifices are never living. When they made sacrifices in the Old Testament, they killed them and then put them on the altar. Y'all, who know I'm telling the truth? So for years, I was a little lost. I'm saying, wait, but present myself as a living sacrifice. But he is saying he wants you and I to be a living sacrifice. In other words, he wants us to be a living dead thing. Question is, how can I be a living dead thing? Either I'm dead or living. Either I'm dead or alive. Amen? It don't make. I want you to be a living dead thing. Now, Paul, he explains it. He explains how I can be a living dead thing. He supports this truth in Galatians 2 and 20. Watch this. He supports this truth of me being a living dead thing in Galatians 2 and 20, where he says, I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, what does it say? Nevertheless, I live. He says, I am crucified with Christ. I'm dead. Nevertheless, I live. Yet not I, because I just told you I'm dead. But Christ liveth in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. Jesus is saying he wants us to be a living dead thing. How many people know that this is not just possible, it happened? Because Jesus was the first living dead thing. He didn't go to Calvary and get put on the cross dead. He was a living dead thing. When did it happen? In the Garden of Gethsemane, when he died to himself and said, not my will, but your purpose be done. I'm here on assignment, and no matter how I feel, I gotta be a living dead thing.
Come on now.
Somebody holler, say, Jesus was a living dead thing.
Jesus was a living dead thing.
Okay. So now he says, I'm crucified with Christ. I'm dead. I'm crucified with Christ. Let's get to the essence of what it means to be crucified. Somebody said, let's get to the essence of it. Go to Mark chapter 15 and go to verse 20. Mark chapter 15, verse 20. I know for some of y'all this is boring, but I'm trying to help somebody discover their purpose. He said, and when they had mocked him, they took off the purple from him and put his clothes on him and led him to be what? Led him to crucify him. They led him out to crucify him. Now go to verse 22. Go to verse 22. Watch this. We're gonna uncover what it means to be crucified. And they bring him unto the place Golgotha, which is being interpreted what? The place of the skull. Okay, go ahead. Next verse. They bring him to Golgotha, and they gave him what? To drink wine mingled with myrrh, but he received it not. Right here, 24. And look at what happens. And when they had crucified him, they parted his garment, casting lots upon them, whatever man should take. Now here's the thing. They crucified him, but he ain't dead. They crucified him, but he's not dead, which means they took him, they hung him on the cross, they nailed him in his hand. Y'all listen to what I'm saying? They nailed him in his hand, they nailed him in his feet, and they crucified him. Somebody say, and he was living. He had to deny himself and become a living sacrifice, taking on your sin and my sin. He had to deny himself. I don't want to go. To the point where he was in the Garden of Gethsemane so stressed, he was sweating water and blood. But he caught himself and said, wait a minute, I'm here on purpose. Paul said it like this, and with the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross. Y'all ain't gonna help me. With the joy, he despising the shame, he endured the cross. What was the joy set before him? While he was becoming that living sacrifice on Calvary, he could see Rodney 2,000 years later. Y'all ain't gonna help me. And that when his purpose would be complete, I would be able to walk out my life purpose. He got on Calvary because he looked at you and saw you living a life better than the one Satan had designed for you. Woo! Touch your neighbor and say, he died for me. And he died before he died. Say, I got to become a living dead thing. So watch this. Go back to verse 22. Go back to verse 22. So we said he says, I'm crucified with him or with Christ or I'm dead. See, when in verse 22, it says, and they bring him to the place called Golgotha, which is being interpreted the place of the skull. Literally, if you look up Calvary, they will show you pictures of Calvary on this mountain. Calvary is another Latin word for Golgotha. It is a Latin word for place of the skull. It has the same exact meaning. This is Aramaic or Greek, and in Aramaic, Golgotha translates to the place of the skull, but Calvary, you can look it up. In the Latin, it translates to the same thing. And so in reality, being crucified is more about dying in your mind. Woo! To what you want.
Come on now. Come on.
See, if I'm going to be like Christ, I got to die to what I want.
Right. Amen.
In other words, Jesus is telling you, so you can handle a Calvary, you got to conquer your skull.
Yeah.
You got to conquer your thought life. This is the reason why you keep getting out of position, because of how you think. And God cannot have all of you when the world is occupying your thinking. Y'all ain't saying nothing. Somebody say, get your head together.